Our next two guests will be familiar to many of you. Philippe Archinard is the Chief Executive of the biotech company Transgene, developing immunotherapies for cancer and other diseases. But he's also president of Lyon Biopol, the organization bringing together the life science industry in Lyon and the surrounding region. Michel Goldman, a renowned clinical scientist and until recently executive director of the Innovative Medicines Initiative, the public-private partnership which brings together Europe's life science industry with the European Union to foster R&D. Very good to be joined by both of you, Philippe and Michel. Michel, you've had the perfect vantage point with your role at the IMI to see industry, public sector, academia working together. Having left that role quite recently, did you leave optimistic about progress towards adopting new models or pessimistic?
I'm optimistic, and I will let you know why. I think that what has been demonstrated is that indeed by joining forces you can do things moving forward and indeed reaching the patients. But for that first you need money, but money is not enough. And as the CEO of the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson said, money alone won't bring cures. You need to think about new ways to use the money that you need, and this is what we try to do at IMI. Of course, as Ruxandra said, we had a large budget, but what we try to do with the Commission, with the European Federation of Fiber Industry, is really to make medical research evolving. And there are key aspects that were not and that are still not sufficiently considered that we have to move forward to remain optimistic. First is to make sure that data are standardized. We need standards to move clinical research forward, and to establish standards is not something very attractive for academics, but I think that through IMI, with the help of other organizations such as CDISC, we demonstrate that the development of standards can be extremely rewarding. To learn from success, to learn from failure. For example, our consortium in IMI on schizophrenia demonstrated that by gathering data from 8 different companies on, I think, more than 10,000 patients enrolled in different trials, you can demonstrate that you can reduce the duration of the clinical trial and the number of patients to be enrolled. But we have also to learn from failure. I think you asked the question about dementia. And you know of all these phase 3 trials which failed. And there, when you try to combine data, it's not so obvious. So you have to develop standards, and you have to develop standards that will be approved by the regulator. And again, I think it was, and it's still one of the strengths of IMI, is to engage regulators, and one of our success was indeed to lead EMA to develop new guidelines in the case of Alzheimer's autism. Now, I think this has been alluded to. There is also a new type of research which aims at changing the design of clinical trials. You know, these placebo-controlled randomized crossover trials, I mean, they are not efficient. We have to use new tools, new statistical approaches, and there the key word is adaptive. You need adaptive clinical trial design, which are important to accelerate the process, but they are also important for the patients immediately, because it will increase the chance for a patient enrolled in a trial to get an efficient product. Also, we heard about, the research which is needed to really develop this new pathway to indeed make sure that the new medicines reach the patients. And there also we need the regulators, and especially in Europe, together with the Commission, together with IMI, these new adaptive licensing pathways are explored very intensively. And finally, I would really insist on new methods to assist risks, benefits of drugs and vaccines. And the example of vaccine is very interesting. Again, through IMI, it was possible to bring around the table not only industry and academia, but also the ECDC and the European Medicine Agency to reflect together to develop like a blueprint to indeed assess the risk-benefit of vaccine. So I think that if we succeed to move forward with these new approaches, we can be optimistic.
Philip, feel free to respond to anything that Michelle's raised. If I can also just throw in a question with both your transgene hat and also as the head of a cluster trying to foster collaboration. This industry, open innovation, it sounds like a nice concept, but this industry has traditionally been based on the value of your own intellectual property. It's been quite secretive. Is the industry ready for the psychological shift required of more collaborative, open R&D?
I think it is, things have changed dramatically, and I see as example a project that we've been driving recently in Lyon, and it's setting up from scratch with different stakeholders of a new technological research institute. Because I think that everything that Michel said is obviously correct, but it failed to change the paradigm, and in fact we still stay in a mode where one usually large industry player is asking a question, and it's a make or buy type of thing. He's either doing it alone or doing it with somebody else, but it doesn't truly change the paradigm. I think we have to come up, because that was enough in order to answer simple questions. But now the unmet medical need we are all facing are such that even the largest company cannot even dream to be able to cope with that alone. And this is why I'm optimistic in a way, because the challenges are such that it forces even the largest company to change. And I think this is what we see. And Sanofi is one of the founders in this Technological Research Institute. And I'm not sure that they would have been behind the project as they are today, maybe 10 years ago or 5 years ago. So I think that if only we have to work together in asking, it's in the way we have to bring all stakeholders, and we've touched upon the fact that payers and patients should be more and more part of the specs in a way. I mean, we cannot think of innovating product absent of input from these guys very early on. Academia, large companies, but also smaller companies. And these all stakeholders should be involved early enough to frame the questions. And then we find ways to provide for solution. But we need to change this. And this is what we are aiming to do in our Technological Research Institute. And the last element I would add on this is that we have to move from this virtual project where we are partners, but everybody stays on his own premises and far away from each other, to a concept where people work together under one roof as much as we can. And this is also one of the elements of this new Technological Research Institute that we are trying to bring. And I'm convinced that if you have around the technological platform scientists coming from many origins, working together, willing to share something and not to control everything, understanding that if they own a part of something which is 10 times bigger, they are better off than owning 100% of something 10 times smaller. I think we will make progress.
Michel, you wanted to come in?
No, I think I agree with Philippe. We are not there yet in terms of optimizing collaboration. And I think that one of the reasons is that whereas the industry is quite well organized, what means value for industry is clear, the objectives are clear, I think for the other stakeholders, we have still to organize ourselves, the governments, the universities, the small, medium-sized enterprise, the regulatory agency, the patients' organization. And, you know, we have to enter into a fruitful dialogue with industry, and this needs, I think, additional reflection and organization. And for me, it's all about agreeing of what means value for each stakeholders, and to organize the collaboration according to what we define as value, which means that we have to develop also new metrics to evaluate, you know, also the performance of all these things. And there, I think that patient outcomes will become more and more important. And that's one of the key reasons why we have indeed to engage much more patients in the process, because one key value element is indeed the patient outcome.
I'm interested in your view as to where the greatest blockages exist, because when I talk to pharma executives, they say, you know, we're ready to embrace value-based pricing, adaptive licensing. They say it's often the health systems and the regulators who are not keeping up. Is that valid?
Question for me?
Yeah, I'd be interested in
I think the reality is more complex. First, I don't think that all companies agree necessarily together. Second, inside the same company, the view might be different. What the CEO will tell you might be quite different from what the lawyers in the same company will tell you. So I don't think that it's so obvious. I think that what's obvious is that everyone agrees that significant changes are needed in terms of clinical trial licensing. How this will operate, I don't know. I hope that the efforts made by the European Medicine Agency in Europe, with the strong support of, again, the Commission and IMI, which is investing a lot there, will indeed allow to implement, you know, pilot trials and things like that. But I think it's a bit easy to say, okay, industry is ready and the others. We have still to organize, again, these things according. Also, it's not easy because the regulators must be careful for obvious reasons.
But I don't think we need to, at this stage, agree on the final game, because we don't know what it's going to be. I think what's important today, and I think we are there, because again, the productivity of the R&D of pharma is overall declining, the cost of any development is increasing, the challenge to solve are increasing, so that there is at least a willingness to try something else, to try something new, to try something different. And we have to be confident and optimistic that there may be different ways to tackle this problem, depending on where we stand and so on. But at least if we don't try, we are sure to stay the same. So this willingness to try, I think, is there within the large pharma player, the large actors in the industry. And that's maybe what we should be focusing on, and we'll see where it ends.
Okay, let's talk quickly about financing. We've seen some improvement in Europe. You know, there's, as Ruxandra said, you know, there has been an increase in financing over the past 18 months or so. But when Selectis looked to raise serious money recently, it went to NASDAQ. How can Europe close the financing gap?
If I knew. No, I mean, first we have to be more specific, because I think it's quite heterogeneous. If we look at public subsidies, in a way, I think if we put together what the local governments, the state and Europe puts together, we may end up matching what the US government is doing. If we look at the number of startups in Europe versus US, I think we have more startups in Europe than in US. If you look at seed money, maturation, early stage, we have, I think, I know maybe more the situation in France, but I think it's true also beyond. We have adequate financing. So I think where we really truly have an issue is the stock market. I mean, and this has a lot to do with basically the way our retirement are paid, the fact that we don't have pension fund, that we have a fiscal system which is less prone to enthuse risk-taking in the investor. So there is a big gap. And the fact that, I mean, you mentioned Selectis, you could have mentioned a lot of names, is simply that there is a lot more deeper pocket over there. And also, and I think that, as you say, money is one thing, so the quantity is important, but it's also a system. And what we don't have here in Europe is a large enough group of people that goes from analysts, from fund management to I mean, it's a whole system, and the capacity to invest that makes the difference in the US. We have too few analysts, for instance, in Europe, and that's in itself is a big problem.
One quick word on financing, then I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up. So, Michel.
Yeah, just 2 points. First, I think that Europe under Horizon 2020, took very important initiatives to support the small, medium-sized enterprise and to facilitate their financing. And I think it's important for all of us to consider this. This is one point. The other point is that I really think that we need completely new scheme for certain types of funding. And I have been very impressed by the proposal made by Andy Lowe, economist at MIT, proposing to create mega funds to address key questions related to cancer, related to rare diseases, and more recently to dementia. And I think that we really need this type of reflection from top-notch economists to really change the system.
Thank you very much, both of you. I'd love to talk longer, but we'll have to leave it there. Perhaps we can continue over cocktails.